Okay, so the name of this class is Climate Change, Science, and Global Solutions, and we're really going to focus as much as we can on the solutions, but we like to start with the science so that everyone is on the same page. And so about the first quarter of the content is getting everyone on the same page about the science, as well as a little bit about how our community feels about the issue, because that's important as well, because that influences what people are willing to do. If you're just joining us, the chat is where you're from. If you can enter in the chat where you're from, as well as what interested in you in this class, that would be great. And then as we go, if you have questions on the content, go ahead and put those in the chat, and we will stop occasionally and answer some of those so that we can address your questions. So again, thank you all for joining us, and let's get started. So when I first did this class, I did it in partnership with Dr. Jennifer Schaefer, who is the co-executive director of the Science Environment Council of Southwest Florida. And she covered the science and I covered the solutions. And she had this great approach to the science, which addressed some of the myths that are out there about climate change. And so I've kept that approach, and many of these are still her slides. So I just wanted to give credit and thanks to her, and explain that we're going to address these in 3 or 4 different frames related to some of the myths that might be out there on climate change. The first one we're going to address you may have heard this, that climate change is a hoax, not happening. But we actually know that our climate is changing because we're actually seeing the impacts that had been predicted many years ago are actually happening now. So we're seeing changes in rainfall and snow patterns. We're seeing stronger storms, as well as increasing frequency of high heat days. And then in the West, you certainly are seeing on the news droughts and wildfires that are resulting. And then our oceans are also getting warmer, sea levels are rising, and our coral reefs are struggling. So all of these things were predicted many decades ago as potential impacts of climate change, but we're seeing them in the news now. So we know this is happening. This is a really complicated slide, and it's not meant for you to look at each data set, but just to understand the trends. So you can see all of the ones that are going up are related to temperature, sea surface temperature, air temperature, and then related to that is sea level rise. And then the ones that are going down are related to snow cover and glacier extent and sea ice extent. So you can see that consistently across multiple sets of data, the trends are as you would expect for the climate change predictions that we've heard from scientists. I just got this update just yesterday. So this is the latest carbon dioxide reading from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. They get daily readings of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and they're setting records. And this is a historical trend back to the 1700s. And you can really see this rapid increase in acceleration really since the 1960s. So that's several points of scientific data saying, yes, climate change is happening. And there's this great set of data from the Yale Climate Opinion Survey that is actually accessible at the county level. So they have national data, but then they actually have county data. And so we're here in Sarasota County, and I'm going to share our data, but those of you who are elsewhere can actually go to this link and pull up the data for your county specifically, and understand how your neighbors are feeling about this issue. So the first question we were addressing with the science was, is this actually happening? Scientists say yes. What do our community members say? In Sarasota County, 71% of residents do understand and think that climate change is happening. So the next myth that you might have heard is it's happening, but it's not our fault. Humans aren't the cause of it. So let's look at that piece of data. This is a compilation of many, many models that have been done by many, many scientific studies. So they put all the models together in one chart to show what the projections of the models would show for historical trends. And the green line is what the models show if only natural factors were taken into account. So only like where we are in relation to the sun, the cycles of how our planet moves around, those kinds of things that many people might say are the reason that these changes are happening. When you put those into the models historically, the green line is what would happen. And that's actually not what we're seeing. The black line is the actual observations for the last century. And the blue is what the models show when you include human factors in addition to the natural factors that are in green. So this is what many, many models all compiled together show. And it proves that it is humans that are causing this rapid increase in the global temperatures. And then as a result, many of those other factors that we showed on the last slide. So what is causing all of this? There's many contributing factors, but they come in the form of land use change, perhaps for development, perhaps for agriculture or forestry. Also, there are other greenhouse gases other than carbon dioxide, including methane that's quite strong. So methane from landfills, methane from livestock production. And then you come to power production, the use of fossil fuels in our power plants, the use of fossil fuels in our vehicles, in our airplanes, getting us to and from all over our communities. So that's the breakdown of where these sources are coming from. So that point about the scientists agree that it is human caused. What do our neighbors think about that science? This one's a little bit less. It comes in at 56%. Believe it's mostly caused by human activities. So again, we have some work to do in educating the community about what the causes of these changes that people are seeing are. And when you break down the greenhouse gas emissions by sector in the United States, in this case, it helps because they've distributed electricity use across the sectors. So sometimes just electricity production might be one of these pieces of the pie, but it makes more sense to divide it up to where that power is actually used. So that's what this pie represents. So residential and commercial is the largest piece of the US greenhouse gas emissions at 31%. But very similar is industry and transportation. So it's pretty much a third for each of those, and then a 10th for agriculture. So when you look at what are the causes and how does it break down here in the United States, this is the basic approach. When you look worldwide, there's this really interesting graphic from Project Drawdown that talks about the sources of the emissions, as well as the sinks. So the atmosphere is this incredible dynamic system that is pulling and holding some of these emissions, and then also our natural systems in our land and our ocean are absorbing much of the emissions that are being that are in our atmosphere. So there's this great cycle that goes back and forth, but not all of it is absorbed through the sinks. So this about 59% still remains in the atmosphere and is affecting climate change. When you look globally, electricity production here is 25%. Food, agriculture, and land use emissions are 24%. Then you get industry, transportation, buildings, and then sort of the everything else category. All right, so the next myth is climate has changed before. Why does it matter? This is all going to happen. We can't control it. So yes, the Earth has experienced many changes in millennium, thousands of years before. So the time frame on the bottom of this chart is thousands of years before present. And looking well back, certainly there have been these cycles. But if you look at the CO2 concentration, never in the history has it been as high as it is now. And so that's really, this large increase is what we're concerned about. So these indicators likely have not caught up with this increasing CO2 concentration. And we are already at the maxes of where most of these previous indicators have been. So yeah, Florida's changed a lot over time. And it's really important to recognize that. But the human cause of this is what is making the changes so rapid, as well as we don't know in terms of the projections how far it might go. Looking at sea level here on the Gulf Coast, our closest tide gauge is in St. Petersburg, and so we use that one, and it has the longest record, and you can see a clear upward trend here over since 1947. And that trend is actually increasing. So even just in the last couple of years, these parts of the graph have gone up even more. And this is from the Tampa Bay Climate Science Advisory Panel, which was a group of scientists who all got together and said, this is the projection we should use in order to watch historical and future sea level rise in Gulf Coast of Florida. And so that was the backward looking sea level rise. This is the projection going forward. And there are different lines on this map depending on what the emission scenario is that we land on as a global community. So if we get together and implement a lot of policies and programs to reduce our emissions, this is the lower target for sea level rise. But if we do really don't do much, then this higher target is what we're looking at in terms of future sea level rise. So they've got this middle or interim one as well. So it really matters what actions are taken now as to where we land in terms of sea level rise and other impacts in the future. So what does that look like in our communities? I'm going to share a few pictures. This is a picture of Siesta Key, which is here off the coast of Sarasota. And this is not during a storm. This is actually a king tide event, which is the highest tide of the year. It's not because of rain. This is actually just the tide coming in, and these docks are underwater. So what we often talk about is with sea level rise, the high tide now might become the low tide in the future. So what does that mean for where the higher or king tides might be in 20, 30 years for the Siesta Key community? This is Longboat Key, which is also off the coast of Sarasota. And again, this is a king tide. This is water coming in from the storm drains from the bay. So this is salt water on the roads of Longboat Key. And this is a picture from the road, from the sort of landward side of Siesta Key during a recent tropical storm. So this one is not a king tide. It is the result of a storm, sort of a storm tide, but it isn't at the maximum point. So the entire very wide point of Siesta Key was underwater during this tropical storm. And again, it's just an indicator of what the big impact that sea level rise could have. So the frequency of what we call high tide flooding is expected to increase. And again, you look at the scenario for emissions changes over the coming century, and lower emissions mean less frequent high tide flooding events. The higher emissions mean they'll become much more frequent and sooner than under the lower emission scenarios. And this is a picture of our region with the number of homes that are at risk of chronic inundation with moderate levels of sea level rise by 2100. So the darker oranges are 25,000 to 150,000 homes. So this is not just directly along our coast, it's also going to be affected along our streams and creeks, and is something that a lot in our community should be paying attention to. Shifting gears a little bit beyond sea level rise, the increase in hot days is also something of concern, and particularly one for some of our lower income residents, the workers who work outside. These are really concerns, even for our youth who are active in sports outside. This is going to be a concern. So just since 1966, our community, Bradenton, just north of Sarasota, has had 42.5 more days over 90 degrees than we had in 1966. So on an annual basis, the frequency of these high temperature days is increasing, and that can cause concern. It's not cooling down as much as it has at night, and we're having longer, higher temperature days. So again, that was the backward-looking data, and then using that, scientists have projected what we can expect going forward. This is the frequency of days now, the sort of historical climate, a little bit earlier than now, projected to 2040 to 2070, and the darker colors are an increase in days over 95 of 75 days per year. So a lot of these are concerning trends, concerning projections. And so we want to look at, what does our community think? Are they concerned about these potential and existing impacts? So what percentage of Sarasota County residents is worried about global warming? And that comes in at 63%, which is just a little bit lower than the national average of 65%. So a good portion of our community is worried about what's happening and what it might mean for the future. So the last myth that we're going to cover today is this is too complicated. It's too big of a deal for me to make a difference. So why bother? This is the last piece of this argument that sometimes people use is, I can't do anything about it, so why bother? And I often point to this editorial cartoon that was released in 2009, actually before one of the international climate negotiations. And it talks about, look at all these potential benefits from addressing climate change. And someone in the audience says, well, what if it's a hoax and we do all of these things for nothing? It really isn't nothing because there are so many benefits that come from addressing these climate solutions. It can increase our air quality, our water quality, improve our health. We call those co-benefits and lots of opportunities to make a difference in our community beyond just climate change improvements. So I'm ready to shift from a little bit of the depressing news to really focus on solutions. And we like to do that through a program which is called Drawdown, and it's a book that was edited by Paul Hawken. And some of you may have come to see Paul Hawken speak. He came to Sarasota several years ago to talk about this book. We had a great event. It was really inspiring. And what's great about this book is it doesn't dwell on those scenarios of the bad things that might happen. It focuses on this potential solutions, and it makes a very clear argument that this is possible, that we can work together and come up with reasonable existing solutions in order to reverse climate change. And so it's a really helpful resource. It's available at your local library. And we're going to use that as the framework for talking about these global solutions for what's possible. The way that Paul Hawken and his team did this project is scientists from around the world came together and they did peer-reviewed analysis on the full spectrum of climate solutions, what exactly could be accomplished in the next 30 years. And they had 70 research fellows from 22 countries. They narrowed down the list of all the potential solutions to the top 100 that really could help us achieve this goal. And they didn't want to focus just on those things that were on the horizon, or if we had this technology, we could. They really only evaluated those that were commonly available, economically viable, and scientifically valid. These are solutions we already have at our disposal. They can be done today with the right policies and collective effort. So they did these literature reviews, they did a big analysis of what would be involved in the costs to do these programs, as well as the benefits that would come from them. And there's quantified information for each of these 100 solutions. So most of them actually have cost benefits once you look at the pros and cons. Many of them also have less tangible benefits, those co-benefits I mentioned earlier, security, health, poverty alleviation, and other environmental benefits. So from now on in this presentation, we're going to focus on what's possible. We're going to see opportunities to touch every sector and what can be done on this journey with creative and a strong global commitment. So I think that you'll see that all of this can be very positive and optimistic. Just a reminder that as we go, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And this is sort of a break point between the science and the solution. So don't forget to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll keep an eye on those. For this part of the program, we're actually going to do a quiz format to keep it lively and interesting. So we're going to inspire us through a little quiz and ask you all to engage through a polling system that is in Zoom. We're going to work our way through some of the most interesting and relevant solutions with the greatest impact. And I'm going to have a series of questions that sort of challenge your assumptions and hopefully surprise and inspire you. And we're going to start with this first question. But as we go through, don't get hung up on the details, just do your best. about which one you think ranked higher in each of these scenarios. So let's get started. The first is of the 100 most impactful climate solutions that they analyzed in the drawdown book, which one had the greatest potential global impact? Was it restore tropical forests? Was it solar farms, managing refrigerants, or organic and regenerative agriculture? So go ahead and make your choice. I'll explain a little bit. For tropical forests, they were restoring 751 million acres of degraded land in the tropics back to intact forests. For solar farms, they quantified going from 0.4 global electricity from utility solar to 10%. And for refrigerants, they are talking about containing 87% of refrigerants in 30 years. And regenerative agriculture was going from 108 million acres to 1 billion acres using that regenerative technology and practices by 2050. So let's see, has everyone that's going to vote entered your choice? See, we've got a couple more people. It's okay. The real answer is there are no wrong answers because all of these are in the top 100. But we're looking for that number one. Okay, Liz, you can go ahead and end the poll, share results. So we got the most for organic regenerative agriculture and then some for restoring tropical forests. And I like to start with this question because it's a surprise to pretty much everyone. The number one solution was actually managing refrigerants. And it's fascinating, but the reason is that these hydrofluorocarbons, these HFCs chemicals that help us cool through our air conditioners and our refrigerators, those are among the most powerful greenhouse gases. And so containing those and not allowing them to go into the atmosphere when we do repairs or when we replace our air conditioners or refrigerators can have an incredible impact. And so they made some assumptions about implementing an existing international agreement on phasing out HFCs, as well as proper disposal of existing refrigerants. And that goal of containing 87% of them within 30 years would have an impact of 89 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent. But this is one of the ones that actually has a pretty high cost because it's this distributed challenge of capturing them from all of these different refrigeration technologies. So this one ranked number one for the biggest impact, but it would cost $900 billion over by 2050. Okay, so that was number one, and now we're just going to pick a collection of some of the other ones. So for the next round of questions, it's which one ranked higher. And for this one, Liz, you can go ahead and launch the poll. Thank you. The options are rooftop solar, which would be not utility scale, but on our homes and our businesses. Rooftop solar at 7% by 2050 globally. Afforestation, which means planting timber plantations on marginal lands. Offshore wind turbines going to 4% of world electricity use. And the last one is educating girls. So if you want to make your choice. All right, I think we're getting close. Any last choices? Great, let's share our results. So we got most of the answers saying educating girls and then one answer for afforestation. And let me share. The answer is educating girls. Good job. Most of you got that. This actually turned out to be the number 6 most impactful solution to reverse climate change. And I think that's pretty incredible. You might be asking, how is it related? Primarily, it's through the impact on reproductive rates. Schooling can reduce family size by 4 to 5 children per woman. So educated girls also have more productive agricultural plots. Their families are better nourished. They and their children are healthier. They're more resilient to natural disasters. There's so many benefits to this single strategy. An economic study found that educating girls is cost competitive with almost all of the existing carbon reduction strategies. So the analysis set a goal of universal education in low and middle income countries by 2050. It is certainly an enormous task, but it's something that the United Nations estimates would cost about $39 billion per year. And as I shared, the return on investment on that is really incalculable. There's so many other benefits to this. So this is not a local problem here, but it is something that we've provided to share the scale of the opportunity. And there may be opportunity to be involved in support for aid or sort of international organizations that are working toward this goal. All right, our next one is a little bit closer to home and sort of two sides of the same coin. Which one of these do you think rank higher, composting or reducing food waste before disposal? You're getting the hang of it. You're much quicker on your answers. Great, I think that's everybody. We got reducing food waste, which you all were correct. Good job. So reducing food waste came in at number 3 of the climate solutions. It is about reducing food waste in production, in the supply chain, and in the household. So preventing it from getting to the point where it needs to be disposed of in the first place. But if composting is also important, and that came in at number 60. The carbon benefit from the emissions for food waste reduction is actually more from avoiding deforestation that is then needed for farmland than it is the actual waste itself. So this is one of those things we're going back along that analysis to all of the steps that are involved in creating these emissions is really important to understand. All right, let's move to our next one. The next one is some solutions that we talk a lot about here in Sarasota County sustainability. Which one do you think rank higher, rooftop solar or electric vehicles? Okay, great. So rooftop solar came in as the highest in this one, and that's correct. Rooftop solar came in the top 10th spot overall. The scientists set a goal of 7% of electricity generation from rooftop solar by 2050. That's up from only 0.4% globally today. But again, like we're in the sunshine state here, so more than 7% is absolutely possible here. And there have been some goals set already from Florida utilities aiming to definitely exceed that. What's great about this one is that it's estimated to save over $3 trillion in 30 years. And it also offers a lot of benefits to developing countries, particularly around off-grid applications and rural electrification. Now, again, they're all right answers because all of these are in the top 100. So electric vehicles came in at number 26. And if any of you have an electric vehicle and want to share your experience in the chat, we'd love to hear about it. I personally drive a Volt, and I just love it. All right, so let's go to our next quiz. This one is how people can make their homes more efficient. Both of these are low cost, easy solutions. But if they were ramped up on a global scale, which one do you think would have the biggest impact? Smart thermostats or insulation? The smart thermostats are like the Nest or the Ecobee, the ones that learn from your behaviors and you can control from your smartphone. Okay, I think we can share the results, and everyone chose insulation, which is correct. Insulation came in at 31. It's a well-founded, very practical and cost-effective solution, and it's what we call a great bang for your buck. The analysis set a goal that 54% of existing residential and commercial buildings would install insulation in the next 30 years. I have a feeling that most of us can commit to do that. It's something that's very low cost and will have a big impact. The global net savings from this strategy is $2 trillion. So again, smart thermostats did very well as well. They came in at number 57. But what's great about that one is that it's a simple technology that is very new. And so something that has only become on the market in the last 5 to 7 years already made it into the top 100 potential solutions for climate change. So what else might be on the horizon that's just around the corner and could make a really big difference as well? All right, you guys are doing great. Our next one is also what we call low-hanging fruit, LED lighting and water-saving improvements in the home. Which one do you think would have a bigger impact? Both of these are just residential. The analysis also did similar strategies related to commercial, but in this case, it's just in the home. All right, I think most of you have voted, one or two more. All right, let's show those results. This one was split a little bit more. You chose, a few more you chose water savings for the home, but in the book, LED lighting came in at number 33. And again, this is just for commercial. When you look at LED lighting for commercial buildings, that came in at 44. So those two together are a really big opportunity. People often think that when I ask people to change their light bulbs, it's kind of a cliche. It's been around for a long time. It's a simple thing, but it's really not. It's a critical step that we can all take. And their goal that they set in the book is 2050, 90% of household market would be just LEDs. And so I think that certainly by then and well before, we could all be only exclusively buying LED bulbs. In fact, I think prices are close to low enough now that becomes the smart choice for everyone up front, and particularly because it has those long-term savings. This one has 1.7 trillion in global savings. All right. The next one is two somewhat controversial topics. These are often the subject of sort of environmental shaming, and I really try not to do that as part of our discussions. Everyone has their own reasons for what they choose to do, and we like to find opportunities for everyone to make a difference where they're comfortable. These are some tougher topics though. So the options are increasing airplane efficiency or shifting to plant-rich diets. Most of you have voted, maybe one or two more to go. Okay, let's go ahead and show those results. All right, so everybody chose plant-rich diet, and that was correct. So the plant-rich diet came in at number 4. Food is a very personal and a very cultural choice. This analysis is not telling everyone to just quit eating meat and go vegan. Their analysis focused on a shift of 50% of the world's population focusing on a diet of 2,500 calories per day and reduced meat consumption, not none, but reduced meat consumption. And that alone could reduce 66 gigatons of carbon. It's something that maybe everyone could consider doing. It's what we call being a reducitarian. So nothing exclusive, nothing that's particularly hard, but just trying to reduce the meat and increase the vegetable and plant-based intake. Again, the other option was airplane efficiency improvements, and that one came in at number 43. All right. So our next poll is actually the last one of this round, and we're gonna compare cool and green roofs, which are using the roof technology both to reflect the heat, so it might be painted white, a lighter color roof, or a planted roof, which is these green roofs that can absorb stormwater and also help moderate those temperatures through the building. And that's compared with preserving and restoring coastal wetlands. Which one do you think ranked higher? Okay, last votes. Great, all right. So most of you chose coastal wetlands and a few of you chose cool and green roofs. Let me show you that result. This one was coastal wetlands. It came in at number 52. And I wanted to be sure to show you one of those sinks that I talked about earlier, the carbon sequestration value of our natural areas. And coastal wetland ecosystems sequester some of the highest levels of carbon relative to their land area. It's stored both in the plants above ground as well as the roots and the soil below. And sometimes that's actually submerged, as you can see here in some of our mangroves. The soils of the world's mangrove forests alone may hold as much carbon as the world emits in 2 years. The book Drawdown proposed protecting another 57 million acres of coastal wetlands globally and restoring some of the ones that are already protected. Our local coastal habitats here in Sarasota County are a tremendous opportunity for both protection and restoration. And there's, again, countless other co-benefits that come with this. So economic benefits from tourism, resiliency, water quality, wildlife, and a whole lot more. The alternate that we talked about here was cool and green roofs, and they came in at number 73. Okay, so I'm going to give you a break from the polling for now and give you a little bit of overview of where everything fell. So zooming in just on the top 20 of those top 100 solutions and looking at it from a sector standpoint is really interesting. It was surprising for a lot of us that food came in as the #1 sector for solutions for climate change. And you often don't think about that. But when you take into account reducing food waste, that plant-rich diet, the way we grow our food, all of those contributed to 8 of the top 20 of these solutions. So it's really interesting to think about how we might make some changes just in the way we approach and grow our food. Let's see. The other sector, and it's not necessarily a sector, but it's a big story in the book, is that the hidden #1 solution is split between educating girls and family planning. These are key factors in what the global population looks like in 2050. And that means that advancing gender equity is actually the #1 solution for addressing climate change. This slide shows the relative impact between the sectors. So again, you don't need to read all the little font, but it gives you the size difference for that relative contribution for the food sector, the electricity generation sector, what we can do in terms of how we manage our land use, women and girls. Materials gets to the refrigerants, but also recycling and household waste. And then buildings and cities is about how we design our buildings to be more efficient. And then the last one at 45 gigatons is transportation. So that's where electric vehicles, mass transit, efficient airplanes and cars come in. So it's just really interesting to look at how it all breaks out. And I hope that you can see an issue that's close to your heart in this chart. This is another way of looking at all of the solution. I sort of call it like the rainbow of hope of all of these different ways that we can all make a difference. And so these larger pieces of the pie are in that top 20 that we talked about, and then so many other solutions that are out there. Drawdown did this really interesting approach where this top line is the sources of emissions and the bottom line is the sinks. And then the third piece of this that really isn't a sector, but it's what they talk about improving society. So addressing health and education are a critical climate change strategy. So lots of different ways to frame these solutions and think about how it connects to us personally and to our communities across the world. There's also this new resource that they released recently that's called Climate Solutions at Work. So if you are a business owner or engaged in your workplace and want to find ways that your business can be a little more sustainable or contribute to climate solutions, they've got this great new resource that's available at the link. And we're going to send you these slides afterwards so you can dig into it a little bit further and talk to your supervisors about what might be able to be implemented within your workplace. And then also when we send you the slides, we're going to send you this, this pledge sheet. This is something that we developed when Paul Hawken came to speak in our community, and it localizes the solutions to what is really relevant for us here in Sarasota County. For those of you who are elsewhere in Florida, much of this will still be relevant for you. But because Drawdown is written on a global scale, we wanted people to really feel connected to it here in our own communities. So it talks about what individuals and families can do within each of the sectors within Drawdown. And it gives ideas as to how they can connect to our local organizations and what they might commit to. So I'm hopeful that when you all get this, you might sit down, review it, and maybe actually check some things off of the things that you commit to do over the coming few months. And we here at Extension have other classes and resources that'll help you do that. You don't need to tackle these new changes without information. We have classes on home energy efficiency. We have classes on solar, on sustainable transportation and electric vehicles. We also have step-by-step classes related to composting and worm composting, if you're interested in those, ways to recycle right. And then that workplace point, we have the Green Business Partnership that can help local businesses get certified for sustainable operations, and then several classes related to water conservation. So once you pick which of those strategies on the sheet you're most interested in, you can look at our link here and find the events that are coming up that'll help you achieve your goals. We also have some online resources that might help as well. This is a new fact sheet that we developed in the last few months that's really interesting. I talked about those sequestration benefits of our natural systems. Trees in particular are an incredible carbon sequestration tool, but if you're planting a tree, particularly with a carbon benefit in mind, you might want to think about which type of tree you plant. And so we created this fact sheet that has this table on the back, and it outlines the different Florida trees that you might consider planting. And it tells you how much carbon they sequester both annually and over their lifetime. And then there's some other benefits beyond just what's shown here related to other environmental benefits that they provide, including stormwater runoff avoided. So I highlighted the trees that have the biggest benefit depending on what your priority might be, but all of them are going to have a sequestration benefit. It's just a question of, if you have the ability to choose, you might want to look at this table to think about which one might help the most. And then coming up on November 1st, we have our 17th annual Sustainable Communities Workshop. And the theme this year is advancing climate solutions. So it is exactly what we've been talking about today. It is an all-day workshop that is just an incredible set of speakers. It is both online and in person. So those of you outside of Sarasota County can join online. And if you're here, we would love to see you in person at New College, the Sudikoff Center. And it's just such a renewing and exciting day every year. So we hope many of you can join us for that. So the last thing I wanted to do before we open up for question and discussion is, we talked about that pledge sheet, and I'd really love for you to commit. Where do you think, where can you commit to make a change in your life? Once you've looked into these solutions a little bit more, you've looked at the pledge sheet, which of these areas can you commit to make a change? And so this is our last poll, and it's my way of encouraging you to put on paper or electronic paper what you might make, what change you might make in your life, and what you might talk to your family about. So I'll give you a second to think about that. Great. I think we're close to everyone having completed it. So let's go ahead and end it and show the results. It's really exciting to see. And I see a lot of you are going to make changes within the food sector, which is great. You may not have known how big of an impact that could have on climate change before we had this conversation. Others are going to make a change in how you use energy, how you use land use, and maybe how you get around. So it looks like everyone has found somewhere that they can connect to and make a commitment, which is really exciting. And once you get the resources, you'll have a little more information to dig into and find the details of what the best way to do those things might be. So let me end by saying thank you so much for thinking through this with me and being interested in how you can make a difference. We have a lot of resources on our website, and we have those classes that I mentioned. So I hope you'll continue to join us as we work together to reverse climate change and really make a difference across our globe.